Some games might be years old, but their visuals still pack a punch like they just dropped yesterday. In this video, we're showcasing some of the best-looking older games that still hold up and can easily match today's graphical standards. By the way, I've noticed that most of you guys aren't subscribed yet, so if you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. Let's start this list with the game that I really loved back then, Killzone Shadowfall. We're talking about a game that may still surprise you with its visuals, despite being one of the earliest PS4 titles. Guerrilla Games really went all in with the graphical fidelity here. The environments are packed with so much detail that you might find yourself stopping just to take it all in, especially when you beam down from the Vectan cityscapes into the wilderness. There's an incredible world-building aspect captured by the contrast between clean, futuristic cities and overgrown ruins that look far too good for 2013. Now, lighting is kind of the real star here. The way warm sunlight spills through the leaves or reflects off a metal surface feels almost like it's trying to show you everything PS4 hardware could pull off at the time. Even the gun designs feel sleek and weighty, powerfully backed by sound design that just grips you. It's that attention to detail that keeps the game visually relevant, even by modern standards. Oh, and the particle effects during firefights? There's this visceral quality to gunfights that looks insane when debris is flying everywhere, right down to the sparks bouncing off metallic surfaces. You really get the sense of future tech warfare here. This wasn't just futuristic eye candy, it felt like the future was tangible, almost like it wanted to leap out of the screen. It's crazy how Killzone Shadowfall still manages to deliver those kinds of moments. Now, onto something a little different. Infamous Second Son. This game is all about energy, both in its visuals and its superhero-powered gameplay. Players were immediately pulled into this saturated, neon-infused version of Seattle. What made this game such a visual treat wasn't just the improved textures and facial animations, it was the powers themselves. Delson's abilities, whether it's neon light streaking against the night sky or smoke curling around his body, practically light up your screen. The contrast between these brightly colored powers and Seattle's often rainy, muted tones adds so much to the game's atmosphere. It's almost like every time you're zipping across rooftops or blowing something up with your powers, the game wants to flaunt how much style it has. Also, rain. Gotta talk about this. Weather effects feel so alive in Second Son. The wet streets reflecting neon signs or Delson's glowing aura as he rolls into a parkour move. It adds a cinematic feel that lingers in your mind long after putting the controller down. And seriously, the seamless transitions between open-world exploration and combat flow so well. You blink and you're already diving off buildings mid-fight. That's where this game nailed it, by making your powers look and feel super dynamic. It's visually impactful without losing that grounded, gritty look Seattle is known for. The game feels realistic, right up until it starts glowing with supernatural energy. Coming in next is Ryse Son of Rome. Talk about a next-level visual showcase for the Xbox One when it launched. Crytek's proprietary engine pulled off some of the most detailed facial animations and environmental designs from that console generation. You could see every crease on Marius Titus's face and every shadow cast during the intense battle scenes. It's cinematic, theatrical, almost like playing through a live-action historical drama. The beauty of Ryse lies not just in its technical polish, but in its texturing. From the rich designs in Roman armor to the sweaty grimes after battle, it sinks you deep into this stylized version of ancient Rome. Of course, it's not going to pass as an actual history lesson, but visually, it's close enough to make you suspend belief. Little details like glinting swords or cascading water under Roman aqueducts are somehow just as majestic now as they were back in 2013. Another thing that nails it is the combat choreography. Every battle feels like it was designed for a movie set, the finishing moves especially. They might boil things down to a simple, quick-time event, but they look so satisfying that you don't even mind. There's a brutal beauty in Ryse that's hard to forget, and it's simply gorgeous to look at today. Let's not forget about Sonic Generations. Now, if we're talking retro meets modern, Sonic Generations does something special by fusing the iconic 2D platforming vibes of old-school Sonic with the 3D velocity from more modern entries. The way Sega, in 2011 mind you, could make a Sonic game feel this visually polished while still screaming nostalgia at full throttle, impressive. The way the developer, in 2011 mind you, could make a Sonic game feel this visually polished while still screaming nostalgia at full throttle is totally impressive. The remastered classic levels, like Green Hill Zone, absolutely pop with brighter colors, more depth, and subtle touches, like the way light hits tree leaves or the details and brick textures that the original games couldn't have dreamed of. That's just the 2D sections though. When you jump into 3D mode, the sense of speed feels astonishing, with sprawling environments that rush by yet still maintain this crisp, detailed look. Generations somehow manages to lean into both aesthetics, and it works. You can practically feel the rush as Sonic blurs through jagged cliffs, loops, and even up skyscrapers as the blur streaks paint vivid trails behind him. The game's design is all about celebrating Sonic's visual evolution. You're constantly moving forward, yet somehow the environments feel fully fleshed out, with a depth and energy that really belt out. The way it incorporates both retro and modern elements seamlessly also says a lot about why Sonic Generations stands out. Even today, it's timeless yet fresh, perfectly capturing two different eras, letting you feel that nostalgia hit while still marveling at how dazzling everything looks.
I always find her.
Coming in next is Tomb Raider. When the Tomb Raider reboot launched in 2013, players got to see Lara Croft in her grittiest and most visually realistic form yet, and the definitive edition cranks that up even more, adding extra polish to an already impressive game. Just the way the game captures environments like dense forests or that windswept island transforms each set piece into a playable cinematic experience. Tomb Raider's major hook has always been its sense of adventure, and visually, it nailed that. From sun rays piercing through dense canopies to watery caves reflecting flickers of Lara's torch, you get that feeling of really trekking through untamed wilderness. Now, with the definitive edition, you've got better textures, weather effects, and dynamic lighting that totally bump up the immersion. Lara's character model alone looks stunningly lifelike. Plus, it's not just the big moments that shine. Everything from collapsing cliffs to quiet moments of exploration feels alive, with motion and light reacting naturally to Lara's environment. It's a visual feast, honestly, and kind of a testament to how cutting-edge the 2013 Tomb Raider already was. And with the definitive edition, it totally serves as a reminder of the game's craftsmanship, letting you revisit it while still looking absolutely phenomenal, even years later. It's that enduring beauty and grit that holds up, showing that Lara's not just an icon in gaming for her action-packed adventures, but for giving players a world that still holds up today. You can't make this list without mentioning Halo 4. Now, Halo 4, already considered one of the best-looking games on the Xbox 360, somehow looks even better on the Xbox One. You throw this game into the Master Chief Collection, and it doesn't take much to notice how much love was put into that next-gen upgrade. The way the developers intricately designed those Promethean weapons and Forerunner structures makes each combat encounter feel futuristic in a way even earlier Halo games couldn't manage. Now, while Halo has always been about those sprawling, varied battlefields, the thing with Halo 4 is how polished everything looks up close on the Xbox One. Character models look crisp, armor sets glimmer just right, and you've got textures that make environments feel massive and immersive. Even little things like the lighting on those exotic alien landscapes bring this otherworldly feel that keeps pulling you deeper into its sci-fi dream. Honestly, it feels like Halo 4 was already showing what the Xbox One could be, even before we knew it. The Master Chief Collection doesn't really remake the game's assets, but it doesn't need to. Having that smooth frame rate while keeping intact the mind-blowing visuals from the original game is definitely a win, especially since those environments still look stunning with minimal redesign. It's wild to revisit and see just how far the franchise had pushed itself visually by its fourth entry, and how it continues to hold its own, even on a newer console. Let's not forget about Star Wars Battlefront. Right, so this game goes straight for the nostalgia and those cutting-edge visuals that even today stand out. The first time you step onto Hoth or Endor, it's like you've walked straight into one of the movies. Not just because of the sound design, which is spot on, but because the environments match the scale and detail of the Star Wars universe. Now, the lighting in Battlefront deserves its own spotlight. DICE nailed how blaster fire reflects and illuminates dark corners of Imperial bases, or how sunlight cuts through the fog on certain levels. You've got little blasts of red and blue lighting up the battlefield, and the way that interacts with environments gives those battles a dynamic, movie-like realism. It's mind-blowing because it's pure Star Wars. There's no moment where you're not immersed in that world. And then the particle effects, especially during intense battles, add this chaotic beauty. For a game meant for large-scale battles, it's incredible how much effort was spent on each individual player's experience of those environments. Even years later, it feels like stepping into Star Wars has never looked better.
Hello, sis.
You there, kiddo?
Hey, Mark.
I bet you're listening to the chatter.
You know me.
Coming in next is Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge kind of hit with this completely different look for games. A futuristic cityscape drenched in clean lines, geometric shapes, and color. And this minimalist vision of the future, drenched in sunlight and stark contrast, still looks gorgeous. It doesn't overreach with photorealism. Instead, it strips everything down to simple reds, blues, and whites. Not just as a visual style, but as part of how you play the game. That design is perfect for the fast-paced parkour movements as you run across rooftops and leap between buildings. Clear skies, glass-covered skyscrapers reflecting the sun, bright colors guiding your path. It simplifies navigation while keeping things visually distinct. The city feels vast and mysterious, clean yet somehow suffocating, which fits the game's tone perfectly. It helps that movement itself look so fluid. Faith's animations feel real, responsive, and weighty. Momentum builds, and the cityscape reflects that same smoothness with its uninterrupted flow of surfaces and structures. And it's the lighting, especially, that adds this final touch, almost creating a dreamlike atmosphere in contrast to the sharp edges of the city. There's something about that sharp, contrasting color palette that makes the overall presentation of Mirror's Edge look timeless, almost like it doesn't need the latest tech to be visually stunning. The future it imagines still looks clean, striking, and absolutely immersive even today. Next, we've got Alien Isolation. There's something unnerving about how Alien Isolation still holds up, both visually and atmospherically. It brings that grungy, retro-futurism straight from Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien film, making every room aboard the Sevastopol station look like it's stuck in a time capsule from the late 70s. It brings that grungy, retro-futurism straight from Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien film, making every room aboard the Sevastopol station look like it's stuck in a time capsule from the late 70s. The lighting, though, is where Isolation absolutely excels. Every shadow holds weight. Every flickering light could mean the xenomorph is close. The tension is ramped up by how dark it gets, with your flashlight casting eerie, narrow beams that control what little safe space you have. The way the game plays with reflections or the glint of metal surfaces feels so meticulously crafted to keep you on edge the entire time. Then there's the xenomorph itself. Its design feels so creepy, slick, and shiny. True to the original movie, and yet terrifying in a different way because it interacts with its surroundings so realistically. Even the environmental textures like scratched walls, leaking pipes, and old computer screens add this haunting authenticity to the setting. It's that blend of old-school, grounded tech with modern-day graphical polish that makes Alien Isolation hold up shockingly well. It really feels like you're in a space horror movie, leaving the tension lingering even when you're not playing.
Is it someone new? Someone from the Sodom below?
This one's a must-play, BioShock Infinite. If you haven't tried it yet, you're in for a treat. Alright, remember BioShock Infinite? That game still holds its own visually in a way that really pushes the boundaries of what we think about shooters. Columbia, that floating city in the clouds, is why this game belongs on this list. The world building alone, down to the fine details of the propaganda posters and the vintage storefronts, puts you squarely into an Americana dream gone awry. It's the kind of place that feels pristine at first, with its bright colors, clear skies, and ornate architecture. But quickly you start to notice the shadows hiding within all that beauty. The lighting in BioShock Infinite plays a huge part here. Harsh sunlight drowns the city in a kind of hypnotic glow, which almost distracts you from the dark themes lurking just beneath the surface. That light adds a surreal, almost dreamlike quality to the game. It's kind of mind-warping how a floating city can feel so utterly alive, massive yet detailed. It really sets this otherworldly tone that blends beauty with dystopia like it's second nature. As you move through areas, the animations, from Elizabeth tossing players' ammo to crumbling sky towers in the distance, create a feeling of constant movement. Sky rails whip across the city, adding another layer of spectacle as you're zipping through these incredible aerial paths. It visually embraces its otherworldliness, making BioShock Infinite still a total stunner despite being released back in 2013.
Make yourself at home, Talion. We obtained some valuable information from this one before he lost his head.
Let's keep things going with Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Now that's a game that sneaks up on you in terms of visuals. Right off the bat, its open-world design draws you in. From the burnt-out pastures of Mordor to crumbling fortresses, the world is vast, yet it's the attention to detail that really gets to you. The orcs themselves, not necessarily beautiful to look at, are detailed and gruesome in all the right ways. Scars, dirt, weapons, everything about them says they've been in battle, and it grounds the game in this rugged, battle-worn environment of the Lord of the Rings universe. And then there's the Nemesis system, which technically isn't a visual feature, but you're gonna notice how uniquely each randomly generated enemy interacts with you. It reinforces the feeling of depth in the game's world. Each orc you face feels like they could slither out of your memory, battle-damaged and uniquely terrifying, but also completely a part of how this harsh world works. The landscapes, like deep caves, forsaken ruins, and towering fortresses, all feel visually striking, even while draped in Mordor's harsh tones. Yet, there's a stark beauty to it, mostly because the lighting and weather effects capture Middle-earth in a living, breathing state. Now, replaying Shadow of Mordor today, totally worth it, especially when you think about how revolutionary it felt at the time while still standing strong against modern game worlds. Feels like stepping back into a well-crafted page of Tolkien.
You shouldn't have been a cop!
Next up, we have GTA 5. Grand Theft Auto 5 is, without a doubt, a game that doesn't feel like it should be over a decade old. Rolling into Los Santos for the first time with its massive city sprawling in all directions, it gave players this feeling that the next era of open-world games had arrived, and somehow it still feels that way. What stands out? The sheer scale of the city, from highways teeming with traffic to beaches, mountains, and deserts stretching out in the distance. Los Santos feels alive. You can drive into the heart of a busy city one moment, then flee into the peaceful countryside the next. You feel like it's a real place operating whether you're there to meddle with it or not. The lighting, sunset paints the city golden, and nightfall turns it into a neon and headlight-filled beast. All of it creates such a dynamic world. Remember the first time you flew over the city at sunrise or zoomed through the streets at night? The detail in those moments is still mind-blowing. Water effects shimmer, glass buildings reflect everything perfectly, and even NPCs seem to scurry around like they've got their own agenda. It's kind of unbelievable that Rockstar built this whole virtual ecosystem in 2013. The game's ability to hold player interest is largely tied to how lifelike it all feels. Whether it's the varied terrain or the insane little details in each corner of the map, Grand Theft Auto 5 secured its spot as a visual masterpiece that still runs strong today.
You're real. I got special supplier.
All right, I'll take it.
Thanks. Bring your friends. Maybe we can have a party.
Moving on to Sleeping Dogs. Sleeping Dogs often gets compared to GTA, and for good reason. It's an open-world crime game where you explore a massive city while doing some questionable stuff. However, Sleeping Dogs brings something really unique to the table visually, and that's its setting. Hong Kong is the star here. The vibrant neon-lit streets, chaotic market stalls, and towering skyscrapers capture a part of the world rarely depicted in open-world games. You've got this bustling, high-energy urban environment that contrasts perfectly with the narrow alleys and hidden temples. Something Sleeping Dogs excels at is its edge in hand-to-hand combat. And visually, it's a spectacle. Fights play out like martial arts films with flows of movement that feel fluid and cinematic. Dodges, counters, and brutal finishers all have this crunchy, impactful feel to them thanks to slick animations. Each punch, grapple, and environmental takedown feels like it belongs in a martial arts movie, especially those slow-motion impacts, which really let you savor the moment when Wei sends someone crashing into a vending machine. The lighting and atmosphere sell modern-day Hong Kong as this great mixture of gritty and gorgeous. Rain-soaked streets shimmer under the glow of streetlights, and day-night transitions keep the city feeling new in every corner you explore. It may feel like GTA on the surface, but with its incredible attention to local detail and combat flow, it stands on its own visually and in terms of raw energy within every corner of Hong Kong's underworld. Let's continue with Red Dead Redemption. With the PC release of Red Dead Redemption happening soon, the timing is ripe to get lost in John Marston's story again. Back when it first launched, Red Dead already felt like a visual marvel, painting broad landscapes of untamed wilderness and quiet frontier towns. Those open plains with tall grasses swaying in the breeze, or the jagged cliffs casting long shadows as the sun begins to set. It's not just about fidelity, it's about how the game makes every moment feel like a piece of history pulled straight from a Western. Now, the thing with RDR is how much time it gives you to take in the world. Long horse rides through wide-open deserts or forests have this cathartic feeling. Each sunrise feels earned. The visuals actively serve that atmosphere of isolation and lawlessness. Towns feel aged, dust and dirt cover everything, and random thunderstorms roll in overhead, filling the skies with a cinematic beauty you don't expect from an old Western. There's nothing quite like experiencing a gunfight at high noon, dust clouds stirring at your feet as shadows drop across the frontier. The story might be the main draw for the PC players diving in for the first time, but the chance to experience Red Dead's world at higher resolutions and sharper textures will only heighten that immersion. The beauty in Red Dead Redemption is how it uses visuals to blend historical accuracy, storytelling, and sheer spectacle into every frame.
Take it out. Target neutralized! Ownership! 12 o'clock!
Another solid entry on the list is Spec Ops: The Line. Spec Ops: The Line doesn't immediately come to mind when thinking of stunning visuals, but its genius lies in how it uses its setting visually to tell its story. As you weave through the ruined, buried in sand version of Dubai, you start to notice how the broken world reflects on the game's narrative. The iconic skyscrapers of Dubai half buried in sandstorms, the abandoned luxury cars crusted in dust. It's a striking juxtaposition of wealth and decimation. You're navigating the skeletal remains of opulence. The contrast between the outside world, hot, bright, and blindingly sandy, and the dark, claustrophobic interiors of the dilapidated buildings creates a visual tension that matches the mounting psychological pressure. There's this feeling of decay, with the abandoned opulence adding layers to the unsettling nature of the game. Every environment tells a story, a slow unraveling into madness. And then there's the use of light. You'll get hit with blinding rays of sunlight mid-firefight, obscuring your vision while emphasizing how foreign this place feels. The sand becomes almost a character in itself, burying city streets, sweeping through windows, turning into debris during intense shootouts. It's the kind of game where the visuals don't just serve the gameplay, they serve the mood. Spec Ops sneaks up on you, visually and emotionally, packing more of a punch than you'd initially expect with all that sand masking the true depths of the story's darkness. And while the game is no longer available on Steam, you can still get it from third-party reseller sites or maybe, be a pirate. Just kidding. Always support the developer at all cost.
What's your name, friend?
Steed Bonnet.
Well, Mr. Bonnet, let this stay twixt us. But I'm on a secret errand for His Majesty the King, God save him, and I must get to Havana with speed.
Now it's time for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Alright, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag really stands apart in the series, and so much of that is because of its setting. Few games of its time offered such an expansive and deeply immersive ocean experience. The Caribbean environment, with its endless blue horizons, palm-dotted islands, and violently crashing waves, feels alive in a way that transforms the entire game. You've got this splash of tropical colors, the shimmering turquoise waters, the sun-baked sands, and the vibrant greens of pirate hideouts, contrasted against crumbling forts and weather-beaten ships. What truly pushes Black Flag onto this list is its ocean physics and weather system. As you sail from one island to the next, you're constantly facing changing weather. Storm clouds rolling in, torrential rains, huge waves crashing against the hull of your ship. And those waves, they've got real weight to them, making naval battles feel like chaotic spectacles with cannonballs crashing into water and splintered wood flying all over. Even little things like your crew scrambling to adjust the sails in real time add depth to the scene. It's not just the high seas that look good though. Jungle environments, underwater exploration, and coastal towns feel like treasures in themselves. Black Flag takes that old pirate fantasy and steeps it in a visually rich, adventurous world where every horizon beckons. Even today, it's hard not to get drawn into the blue depths or find yourself marveling at a ship framed against a sunset. The world feels so expansive and alive, which is why it holds up as a visual classic. Next on the list is Far Cry 3. This one brought something special in terms of open-world visuals. Running through dense tropical jungles, cresting a hill only to find yourself staring at a panorama of beaches and rugged cliffs. It's the kind of game where you can vividly feel the environment. Rook Island pulses with life. Palm trees sway, waves crash against white shores, and you've even got deer charging through the jungle and birds taking flight. The jungle isn't just decoration though. It's a living, breathing entity, and every time you explore it, the sheer vibrancy of the colors and detail make it feel like an actual tropical ecosystem. Now, speaking of vibrant colors, Far Cry 3 excels in how contrasting colors amp up the intensity of the game's atmosphere. Villages are worn down and grimy, yet the environment around them is lush, almost too pretty in the context of the violence happening there. Jungles, cliffs, lagoons, they're all beautiful, but always dangerous. Even at night, dim campfires and flickering torches create these surreal moments where shadows dance across walls, adding to the game's palpable tension. What also adds to the immersion are the fire physics and explosions, which give the world a level of destructibility that feels very satisfying. You light up a patch of grass with a Molotov cocktail, and flames spread unpredictably, igniting everything in your path. That kind of visual dynamism makes Far Cry 3 feel alive in a way few games back then could. It's stunning even today, with those lush environments drawing you in and holding you tight through the chaos.
Tim? What? Fucking empty!
Guys!
Bill, where to? Bill, where? Anywhere but here. You better haul ass, come on.
Next, we've got the 2013 The Last of Us. The Last of Us is one of those games that set a benchmark in storytelling, but also for just how good video games could look. Now, if you're planning to dive in, definitely go for the remake version. It's that rare example of a game that felt ahead of its time visually when it originally came out, yet still manages to blow our minds thanks to the remake's facelift. The world feels gritty and worn down, but oddly beautiful. The overgrown cities, crumbling buildings, and scattered remnants of human life have a weathered look that tells a story before a word's even spoken. The character models are where the remake really hits its stride. You look at Joel or Ellie and you see their stories etched into their faces. The years of survival, the desperation, that weight they carry around. Every facial expression, wrinkle, and even the shine of sweat builds immersion. The lighting, too, completely transforms scenes. Sunlight filters through the cracks of buildings, fires cast ominous shadows in the dark, and it all feels eerily real. You've got this haunting contrast between nature taking over and humanity violently resisting. It's in the smaller moments, though, where the visuals speak loudest, like the way rain pours down during a tense encounter, or dust floats in a beam of light during a quiet moment in an abandoned house. The remake preserves everything you loved about the original, while adding even more polish that solidifies The Last of Us as a visual experience that's still unforgettable to this day.
Wait, all right, fine, sure. So about this problem. Well, that's why I brought the bolt cutters. He opens the door this much, there's a chain right there, I slip him in and snip, and guess what? It's not.
Now, let's move on to Watch Dogs. When Watch Dogs was revealed, people lost their minds over how good it looked. And yet, even years later, the game's visual design still holds up. You're in Chicago, but it's not just a backdrop. The city feels alive and thrumming with energy, from the windy streets to dirtier back alleys. What separates it visually from similar open-world games is largely tied to the city's vibe. The hacking mechanic allows you to see the beauty in places you wouldn't normally notice, like how streetlights flicker off as you manipulate a security system, or how traffic halts suddenly as you change the stoplights during a chase. There's an urban tech aesthetic, amplified by all the lines, grids, and code-like overlays that appear when you're hacking. It's stylish in its utilitarian approach, highlighting surveillance cameras, trapdoors, and the tech-driven underbelly of Chicago. The architecture in the game, skyscrapers wrapped in glass, older industrial neighborhoods, feels very specific to Chicago, adding layers of contrast between old-school grit and high-tech chaos. Weather effects, especially the rain, add serious atmosphere. Wind kicks up fallen leaves, puddles reflect the electronic billboards shimmering in the distance, and everything about the city feels gritty and real in a way that doesn't need over-the-top polish. It's all about tone. Watch Dogs gives you this sense of paranoia, a digital world under constant watch, wrapped up in a city that's both beautiful and oppressive at the same time.
Hey, Carmine, you all right? You're awfully quiet.
Someone's gotta be, with Baird yapping all the time.
To wrap things up, we've got Gears of War 3. Gears of War 3 was a high point for the franchise and a visual triumph on the Xbox 360. Even today, it's one of those games that, when you fire it up, still feels powerful. The world is much more vibrant than in the previous games, but it doesn't lose Gears' signature look. You still get all that grit and grime, the architecture of the COG buildings, the worn-down streets, the sense that civilization is barely hanging on. But this time around, there's more color and variety in the environments. The muscle-bound characters are, of course, back and as intimidating as ever, with their massive, clunky armor that looks clunkier up close but has these intricate details. The textures in Gears 3 are where things really pop off. Take a closer look at a weather-beaten wall or the glint of sunlight off the chainsaw bayonet's blade, and it's clear how much love went into the design. Speaking of sunlight, the lighting effects are ridiculously good for the time. Sunlight streaking through the broken windows of a ruined building looks intense, and when you head into darker, more claustrophobic spaces, like tunnels or enemy bases, you can feel the atmosphere close in on you. The game's mix of large-scale, bombastic firefights with more intimate, tactical encounters keeps the tension high. But visually, the landscapes and destruction zones are works of art in their own chaotic way. Even years post-launch, Gears of War 3 still delivers that larger-than-life, gritty spectacle fans expect. Now, here's Batman Arkham Knight as an honorable mention. Batman Arkham Knight turning 10 next year is wild, because visually, it still feels like it came out yesterday. Even when you play it now, the way it makes Gotham City come alive, especially during a stormy night, is stunning. The rain-soaked streets reflect the neon glow of street signs and lights, while the world itself pulses with that distinct Batman atmosphere. Dark, brooding, and utterly captivating. It's Gotham at its grittiest and most alive, yet somehow tragically beautiful. Arkham Knight excels in how dynamic the world feels. Rain beads off Batman's armor realistically, with his cape fluttering as he grapples between towering buildings. It adds a tactile layer to the whole experience, grounding you in Gotham City's grimy streets and imposing skyscrapers. There's something about how it immerses you into the grit of the city while keeping interactions smooth and visually engaging. The Batmobile, of course, steals plenty of the visual spotlight, too. It's not just about its sleek design, but watching it shred through Gotham's busted-up roads, raining sparks as it drifts around corners or transforms into battle mode. Explosions, debris, smoke swirling, everything looks cinematic, especially during high-speed chases or when you're launching out of it mid-fight to slam into a gang of goons. And the graphical detail and character movements, especially Batman's cape physics, or even in the menacing presence of Scarecrow and the Arkham Knight, still contrasts perfectly with that grimy city backdrop. Arkham Knight blurred the lines between superhero spectacle and gritty noir, and almost a decade later, it hasn't lost that visual punch. It's one of those games that'll probably stick around in conversations about stunning visual design for years to come. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more gaming content. Don't forget to drop a comment below letting me know which game still blows you away visually, even after all these years.